Hi, welcome. I'm Lance Evans with HKI Architects. Had the pleasure of being the lead designer for this wonderful stadium. What it was, it's a true multi-purpose venue. It's a public-private partnership between the city of Minneapolis and the team, the Minnesota Vikings. In Minnesota, the place where it's located is a very harsh northern climate that doesn't necessarily go well with the necessity of long-span structures as we have in the NFL and big sports. But with that, it also had an amazing location and opportunity where we were located on the eastern edge of the downtown core. We could really utilize this project as a chance to revitalize and renew that area of downtown. We looked and develop projects through two separate avenues of research. Market research, we look at demographics, and that we do that in a way to right size the building to make sure that we have the accurate seat count. And this idea of brand research, which I'll touch throughout the presentation. As I said, the Project Givens, we were designing this building for Minnesota, Minneapolis, but also the Vikings. And through a series of research topics, what we really tried to distill down to was the essence of what was important for this community. And it was really about building a design and a stadium that had the essence of the people in mind when we did this, knowing that it was home to very diverse and influential people. And so what we did was we looked at the fabric of the city itself. It's a very rich architectural history in Minneapolis. But it also has a strong geography and geology as it relates to its proximity to the Mississippi River, and also the way that ice forms and breaks apart through the winter and the spring. But also looking back to the old world and knowing that the influence of the team itself and where they came from. And so through that vision, what we decided was this idea that what really was important was this search for authenticity in the design through a series of avenues of craft and culture, but also this way that we could potentially link the city together. We could link the downtown core to the stadium in a series of axes, or we could link the park neighborhoods and together with the stadium to the waterfront edge, but also really integrate into the light rail system of Minneapolis, and then also the Skyway, which is a series of 8 miles of elevated walkways that allows the patrons of the downtown core to travel through the city, but without having to step outside when it's -10, -20 outside. And so the form of our building was really derived by 4 main things. The first one that we had to do was really deal with this climate. And the number one thing for us was, how do we get this snow off the roof? How do we manage the problem with snow on the roof? We know if we did a traditional stadium form, the existing facility that the Minnesota Vikings played in before ours, the roof collapsed due to the snow loading of the stadium. So for us, it was a way to really manipulate the form in a series of simple moves, looking back at the way kind of you would traditionally design a structure in a harsh winter climate, to redistribute and redirect the snow, maximize the southern exposure of the roof itself, and redistribute the snow towards the edges of the stadium. Knowing that we didn't want the snow to fall off onto the ground, we created a series of catchment basins around the stadium itself that can collect and hold the roof. And what it did is it really manifested itself into a truly kind of unique statement architecture of a stadium, but one that was really founded in kind of pragmatic principles. We really worked hard hand in hand with the contractor and structural engineers to parametrically define the edges and the slopes of the roof, to optimize them, to make sure that each slope was designed at the correct angle, and also dealing with the idea of the trajectory of the snow as it comes off the roof. The catchment basin located around the stadium, we were designed to capture a 100-year snow event. So it's a massive amount of snow, and to do that, we didn't want the snow as it breaks off the roof and slides down, it has to pass through what we call a deflector shield. The deflector shield, as you see on the upper right-hand image, deflects the snow down into this catchment basin, and you can see the scale and the magnitude of what we had to deal with as it related to that snow. From a civic response, the stadium itself opens up to the city at higher on the west end as it greets the city to the south, and then as it lowers back to the eastern end as the city lowers in itself. And so from a civic gesture that's really symbolically reaching out, the bowl and the stadium was placed towards the eastern edge of our site, really maximizing that western location that was really connected to the light rail system and also the Skyway, and in a way that we allowed about 65 to 70% of the patrons will come through this western edge. And then there's secondary and tertiary entries along the 3 other sides. of the stadium. But what it really does is it transforms that west elevation into a literal and symbolic kind of reflection of the community in which it was made, but it also at a pretty grand scale. So for us, it was a question of how do we welcome in all these patrons? How do we welcome in 65,000 people into this stadium in a way that was efficient and had of this gestural power? And so we did that with a series of 5 pivoting doors. Each one of the 5 doors varies in height from 95 feet tall down to 75 feet tall, each one of them 55 feet wide. And they also do 2 different things. They do serve multiple purposes. The column in which the doors rotate around also supports the roof itself, or aids in that support. And so it's as you can see, from nighttime when the doors are closed, it still reflects that city. But then as they open up, they really welcome in and kind of bring that energy of the community in through the stadium. But also as you're looking back out, it welcomes in that city back into it. This idea of the brand research was really a search of, could we find something in Minneapolis that was going to take us to the right place as it relates to materiality? But what our study kind of showed on that was maybe we need to look back even further. We were really inspired by this idea of the traditional Viking longhouse and how it was clad in the timber, and that timber would patina and age over time. So we clad our building in zinc, anthracene, that will continually patina and age as the building ages. It'll kind of weather into a soft gray as the building transitions. But also the form was really inspired by the ice shards and this notion of the jagged rocks at St. Anthony Falls to create kind of these urban moments or kind of realizations of this image into the form. And you get a striking complex when you're looking at it from a pedestrian scale in the close-up, but it also serves as a great anchor to this public space that's in the foreground of the stadium itself. And from a sustainability, we knew if we were going to be authentic, we had to be sustainable in the way that we do this. We started here with the interior of the bowl, and really the use of clear as the new retractable is what we kind of sold the project as. The NFL had a fascination with a retractable roof, is kind of all the new stadiums had to have one, but what we wanted to do is kind of sell the idea that we could give you everything you wanted out of a retractable roof by actually allowing the natural daylight to come in, which really reduces the need for artificial light. You'll notice there's no lights on in this image right here. This is completely day lit. It also helps in the snow management of the building. The heat air rises up, and it's actually becomes a passive snow melt system. And then the stadium seating bowl itself, it's completely bespoke for different situations of functionality, so we can play baseball, soccer, football, of course, X Games, motor events. And as you look at it from a structural standpoint, what we were able to do with the loft of the stadium and the ETFE, we were able to kind of take what traditionally in stadiums you would have 2 massive trusses and super columns going around. We were able to reduce that to 1, which reduced ultimately the carbon footprint of our stadium and the steel tonnage in the project. And so we knew we were making big moves with this form, and how could we kind of use those to our advantage to create this ultimate machine. So we used the loft of the stadium itself in the wintertime to actually create a heat reservoir. And then we have a series of 4 vertical heat and air risers at the ends of the stadium where you can capture the heat and redistribute them into the lower areas of the stadium where they're needed. That process is reversed in the summertime, where the cool air that is distributed down to the bowl gets redistributed into the upper areas, and the hot air is released out through the high ends of the stadium to promote that convection. But I think perhaps the most important thing that we were able to do with this project was actually one of urban renewal. The project itself spurred the development of almost 1.2 million square feet right now in a traditionally derelict place of downtown Minneapolis. And then also it instigated the design of a public park, a 3-city block public park. And what we've done on the inside of the stadium was bring things traditionally found, in your home, and try to bring those into the stadium to capture the imagination of the fans as they enter into the space, bringing them closer to the game itself and closer to the team and the action. And so I'll leave you on this slide, and I actually had the pleasure of standing about right here when the Vikings used this for the first time. 2 of the teammates were walking down, one slapped the other guy on the shoulder, and it was like, man, we're home. And it was such a great kind of feeling that something that was so very different and abstract in so many people's minds actually transformed into something that was quite familiar. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Ian?
Just, oh, I thought I heard Ian. Okay,
Yeah,
you go
it was
first.
Ian. It's you.
Okay. Just curious, in terms of the capacity, you said 60,000. How far is the furthest spectator from the pitch?
The highest kind of seat in the stadium is actually closer than you would when you think. The traditional stadium seating bowl, like if you think about the Rose Bowl, the Coliseum, the bowls are laid back quite far, so that the spectator in the last seat of the last row is actually.
Any numbers?
The specific number? No.
Yes,
no.
exactly.
Yeah. In the section, yeah. So it ends up being, you know, you're in the kind of the 100 feet range when you break it down. But it's quite a bit closer than traditional stadium because we broke it down into many levels, and that pushes you closer to the stadium itself.
Just a question. The grass, is that natural grass or artificial grass?
It's artificial turf, and that was for the multi-purpose nature of the project. You know, if you have natural grass and you put an event on it, like a concert or a tractor pull, what it does is it actually kills that turf, so you have to keep replacing the natural grass.
That's the European problem we have, yeah.
Yeah, and then so if you see an image like this, where all these events kind of take place in the stadia, it was a way for us to efficiently transition through different event types without having to do the waste of natural grass.
How do you cool down this stadium? What is your source of cooling in summer?
It's traditional air conditioning. You know, we have the traditional tonnage. We tap into the infrastructure of the Minneapolis line, so it's a traditional HVAC, but we supplement that with this idea of the vertical risers, and so it's a active-passive system.
So but basically, it's a fully climatized stadium.
It is.
Really?
Can I just ask a question? Sorry.
How hot is it going to be in summer?
It's actually, this is the second year it's been in, and it's actually quite fantastic.
No, I mean the climate in Minnesota. What is the temperature in the summer?
They can control it to whatever they want. The field was designed to maintain.
outside.
Oh, in Minneapolis, it gets to, you know, low 90s. I think is the kind of about the max that we designed to.
Low 90s?
Well, that's Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit. Sorry.
Oh, we only understand Celsius here.
Sorry. 35.
It's not so hot.
Yeah.
It's a lot warmer than the
I know,
Middle
it
East.
was
A lot
one of the-
colder than the Middle East.
I think one of the
Well,
debates that
Middle
we
East.
had was, you know, the ETFE on the southern exposure, and we had to do a lot of modeling and proving out through CFDs that it actually was going to create a pretty comfortable environment.
Your analysis of the snow load and the behavior of the snow that lands there, when it slides off and goes into your troughs, are the troughs heated?
We do have snow melt at the base of
Yeah.
the troughs. Yes.
The ETFE can resist the force of sliding down snow
Yes, it's quite a resilient
because it's
material.
a cushion, no?
It is. It's a 3-layer ETFE system. At the edge of the roof itself, it's supplemented with snow cables. So cables are spaced at every 2 feet on center, just right at the edge of the roof where the load and is its highest before it hits the deflector shield.
And is that season all year around? I mean, do you do breaks in the summer and in the winter?
Yes, it's all year round.
There are breaks?
I'm sorry.
I mean, the season, is that all year round, or is there a break in the summer and a break in the winter?
Oh yeah, the sports team. Yeah, the building itself is utilized all year round. The
Because
NFL is, you know, in the fall and the winter. The baseball is in the spring, and then they use it for all sorts of events throughout the year.
So it's not just a
days.
stadium, it's an arena, it's a kind of
Yeah, you know,
indoor.
actually the middle image here in the bottom, you know, the citizens can actually go in, they utilize the concourse in the wintertime to roller skate or run, to jog. It's quite interesting.
And may I ask another question?
Sure.
I mean, it's a huge animal, right?
Yeah.
Did you think, or what did you do to scale it down for human perception?
So for us, you know, the idea of what entertainment and sport is, there is a little spectacle, right, to what you do in sport. And so we utilize this as an opportunity. Everything we did had a reason. You know, it was all about creating this ultimate machine. But in essence, what we're trying to do is, when you go to a sports, is be entertained and inspired. And so for us, we use the architecture as a chance to do that. You know, to tell a story and actually have people start to question, you know, what building or stadia should be.
Can you show us a picture from the city again? There was one or two images where you could see the building from the city.
Sorry, there's a lot of slides.
That plaza in front. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Is that what you see from the city, more or less?
This is a, yeah. And this was a previously underutilized portion of downtown, and the park was a direct reflection of and response with the stadium itself.
Have you got an image of that at night?
From this section, not from the aerial, but
Not from the park?
no, sir.
So where did they put the stage when there's a rock concert
They put it at the end, right here on the western face.
on the western face? And how do you then get all the trucks in and, you know, all you need for your
That all
gig?
comes through on the eastern edge of the stadium, on the
Okay.
through the back. I think maybe it's right.
Is there more music in the stadium than sports, or what is the relation?
No, it's more sports. They probably do 5 to 6 big concerts a year. You know,
Oh,
they'll
okay.
sell out 100,000 people will come to see a concert, but that's more of a isolated events. The sport itself, you know, is 10 games at a minimum for that, and then there's so many other functions that happen in the stadium, from weddings to bar mitzvahs. You wouldn't believe the amount of utilization that the city gets
Yeah.
out of the stadium.
Okay.
How much did it cost?
It was a little bit over $1 billion.
Sorry, $1 billion?
1 billion, yes.
Lance, thank you very much.
Yes,
Wonderful
thank you.
project.
Thank you.
They designed the one for Liverpool Football Ground when the Americans owned it, and it went 200